Hi guys, it's Gundidi, and I got something cool for you today. We're doing a video on comparison of the newest and greatest Glock clone out there versus the greatest generation of the Glock 19, the Gen 5. Now, this is not a direct comparison because this is a Gen 3 clone, this is a Gen 5, this one's optics ready, this one is not an MOS. So it's not a direct comparison, but imagine this is MOS, then we can do a direct comparison. Starting with the Ruger, this is a Gen 3 clone of the Glock 19, so it's running basic Gen 3 feature sets. Mag release is only on one side, no ambidextrous slide release, Gen 3 style trigger, and basic feature sets. Gen 5, on the other hand, of the Glock 19 is running ambidextrous slide releases, a mag release that can be switched on both sides, so lefties are more available to use these guys, and it's got a more updated trigger set into it. Still a Glock trigger. But let's go over the feature sets, how they're alike and how they're different, and then we'll go from there. Let's compare them side by side first. If you go beaver tail to beaver tail, the Ruger is just a hair longer, and that's mainly because of the beaver tail, but if you go slide to slide, they are virtually identical. Width-wise, I'd say the Ruger is just slightly thinner on the slide. The frame looks virtually identical. You do have a nice little undercut on that trigger for the Ruger, while the Glock, not really. You get that typical Glock knuckle. You do still have a single slot Picatinny rail for both of them. These are Glock rail systems, basically. I will say the Ruger RXM's grip texture is a little nicer than Glock's, but Glock's is very iconic, and it does the job. If you notice the trigger guards, you'll notice that the trigger guards are a little different shaped. The Glock has more of an aggressive outcropping here, while the Ruger is more rounded. But if you notice the inner of the trigger guards, they're virtually identical, which means most of your holsters will actually be compatible with the RXM. Now, moving on to other feature sets. The Ruger RXM does come with a nice little accessory, or a nice little accelerator style pedal on here. It's a little cutout that's textured right there on the grip, which makes it a nice spot to put your thumb and get a good forward pressure going on there to manage recoil. Glock does not come with that. It is very slick up front. So typically on Glocks, I'll run a light on there to where I could put my thumb on the light. Not a big deal, but it is an accessory that the Ruger runs that Glock does not. Now, let's move up to the sights. The sights on the Ruger RXM, I will say, is far better than the standard sights with the Glock. Now, there are variants of the Glock that come with true glow sights or different aftermarket sights. Even Glock night sights are better than the original Glock sights, but these are plastic U-notch sights. They work really well for quick target acquisition, but these are all around a little bit better. You get a night sight up front, blacked out rear, and they are a little higher than standard sights, which makes it optics ready. So when you throw that optic on there, that you can co-witness. Now, moving on to the optics. Now, imagine this is the MOS. I don't have an MOS right now, or else I would be showing you that. The MOS system is nice for its time when it came out. Now it's a little outdated. The MOS is a modular optic plate system. So basically, the top comes off, and you use a plate system based on whatever optic you're running, which was great when it first came out. Nowadays, there's a lot of new optic systems that run a little bit nicer for optic compatibility. And the problem with the plate system is your optic usually starts right here at the top of the slide instead of embedded in the slide a little bit, which unfortunately has had issues with some people where bolts would shear off or the optic will go flying off. I personally have not experienced that, but it has happened to some people, so that's something to note out too. The Ruger, on the other hand, is running a modular optic system that runs a pin set, very similar to the, the Springfield Echelon. Very similar to that. So it's a pin set that you move around and you put your optic in there, which puts it inside the slide, which gives it a little bit more security, a little bit more stability, being inset in the slide where you have both rims of the actual slide kind of helping to keep that optic in place. So it's not just your bolts or your pins holding that optic in place. You also have the slide helping too, which helps with rigidity of optics. Now, what I would like to see with Gen 6 is a modular optic system similar to like the RXM is running, but we'll have to see what Glock does in the near future. Moving on down, the RXM is running a modular chassis system. So basically you take a few pins out and this chassis comes out to where you can run this in a different frame, which is very similar to, yet again, the Echelon, the Springfield Echelon, or the Sig Sauer P320. It's a modular system, and that's pretty much where everyone's running nowadays. Now, Glock, on the other hand, does not run a modular chassis system just yet. That might be something that comes out with Gen 6, since everyone's going that route. But it is running very similar components. Now, this is Gen 3, this is Gen 5, so the systems are not compatible, but it's very similar. You can see the likeness in the trigger bars. You can see the likeness in the disconnects. You could see the likeness even in the actual trigger housing right here. They're very similar. Now, like I said, this is Gen 3, this is Gen 5, so parts are not interchangeable, but I have tried a different trigger, Gen 3 trigger, in this guy, and they are somewhat compatible on Gen 3 triggers. Just letting you know. Okay, so let's try out the triggers. Now, this is a Gen 3 clone, but it should be a better trigger than a Gen 3 because Gen 3 came out in, 98? So trigger technology has advanced quite a bit since then. So the trigger should be a little bit better, but let's go ahead and check it out. Let's see, showing it's clear. There's a little bit of take up to get to a wall, a tiny bit of creep, and then break. Kind of a rolling break, not a direct snap. Let's see that reset. It's kind of a long reset, brings you all the way back out to that original wall. Little bit of creep, and then the break. It's not a bad trigger. I will say it's better than a Gen 3, but it's not bad. But let's compare it to a Gen 5 trigger. Of course, showing clear. A little bit of sponginess to get to a wall. Tiny bit of creep, and then a break. Let's see that reset. And break. I will say that the Gen 5 does feel a little bit better than the RXM. I will say the trigger shoe on the RXM is nicer and feels more comfortable in the hand. But the trigger on the Gen 5 19 is just slightly better, although heavier. The RXM feels a little bit lighter in that trigger pull. That's my opinion. I don't have a gauge to actually judge that. But in my opinion, I would say the RXM is lighter. The Gen 5's trigger is just minutely better. But other than that, I will say there's a lot of today's advancements in this new RXM. The 19 Gen 5 is still running a slightly outdated system because the Gen 5 did come out like 4 or 5 years ago. So it's a little bit outdated in its aspect. Hopefully with a Gen 6 coming soon, I hope. We might see some more new feature sets that are closer to like the more modern pistols that are coming out, like a modular optic system, maybe a chassis system, and maybe some better grip technology on there. We'll see. Definitely some good things to look forward to. Now, the biggest difference between these guys is going to be price. The RXM MSRP is $499. I've seen them as cheap as about $400. That is a huge deal. While the Glock 19 Gen 5 MSRP, I believe, is right around $699. Don't quote me on that. I'll have to look. But I've seen them on the market for right around that $600, $630 mark. So you're talking nearly a $200, $250 difference between the two. Now, the Gen 5 is fully ambi, so maybe you lefties may cast towards the 19 Gen 5 a little bit more than the RXM. But unless you are a lefty, or, you know, me, I'm a Glock fanboy, so at the end of the day, Glock has always got my favor. Maybe the RXM is an option for some of you out there looking for something other than Glock, and you're a righty, not a lefty. Maybe you have no problem with running this guy without the ambi controls. Just some options for you. I wanted to do a video on them directly comparing them, so that way you guys can get a good idea in today's market. Which one would you rather go for? The Ruger RXM or the Glock 19 Gen 5? Guys, if you like this video, go ahead and hit a like hit the like button. Comment in the comment section. Would you rather go with the Ruger RXM with its Gen 3 technology but updated features, or the 19 Gen 5 that's got a little bit more modern innards but outdated outers? Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. And as always, I'm Gundidi, and I'll see you heathens for the next one.